Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are tuning in from. In Berlin, it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon. We already had one session for those joining us online and who might have just only joined right now. We are on the second panel. Before we have been talking about power imbalances from a more global perspective, trying to understand where are we at the moment when it comes to equitable partnerships and as well as technologies, how they can be used to tackle power imbalances. In this second panel, and unfortunately you'll have to listen to me for the next 5 minutes because I will give you a bit of a background and an introduction to our panelists before you will hear very interesting practical examples from the different organizations we have on the panel today. So we will be mainly talking about, in this panel, how digital technologies can actually be used to strengthen accountability or probably not. So it's a question mark, and we will hope to understand more about it during this session. So just a quick reminder for those who have only joined us right now, I have to kick off with a few housekeeping rules. So for you to remember, the session will be recorded, so it will be made available externally. We have, for any questions and comments, Dr. Andrea Steinke, our colleague from the Center for Humanitarian Action, will help us with the online comments and questions after the panel discussion, and then we all again have a discussion with the audience and some special guests who will challenge the panelists on site. It's a 1-hour panel. We hope we'll be on time. We'll try our level best. But before starting the presentation and the discussion, a quick introduction of who's sitting on the plateau for today. Myself, for those who have been already around, I'm Andrea Düchting from the Center for Humanitarian Action. I'm a non-resident fellow, have been working on digital accountability, and I'm the main focal point on the work stream of data and digitalization. With me today, on my left, we have Barnaby Willitts-King from the GSMA. And Barnaby, you know that I always keep on forgetting the abbreviation of what GSMA stands for, but it's GS Mobile Association, as far as I understand, but you will hopefully give us more insights about that later on. It's a network, a membership organization working with mobile operators based in the UK. And Barnaby himself is the Director of Research and Policy at the GSMA, and probably you know him from his present experience at the ODI Humanitarian Policy Group, where he was mainly working on digitalization and digital inclusion and the digital divide as well. So on our far left, we have Kassem Chaalan, hopefully pronouncing it correctly, joining us from the Lebanese Red Cross, from having flown in from Beirut. He's the Director of Disaster Risk Reduction at the Lebanese Red Cross, as already mentioned. And if I understand correctly, it's your 20th anniversary with the Red Cross in Lebanon, since you joined in 93?
I joined 1993, it was almost 29.
Okay, so a lot of experience. He joined as an emergency medical technician during those days, and since 2012 he has been systematically scaling up disaster risk reduction in Lebanon with the work of the Lebanese Red Cross. Last but not least, we have Valentina Shafina, who is from the International Rescue Committee. She's the client responsiveness. Now I have to look at the board again. Client responsiveness and client-centered programming. So what this is all about, we will learn about in a second. Valentina has a lot of experience in working on accountability to affected populations, community engagement, and ways in increasing, strengthening participation of affected populations in humanitarian action. So sorry for this long story, and now I will give you a bit of a background of why we are sitting here and talking about digital accountability. And I have to click myself. Sorry, I forgot that one. Nope. Switch it on first, of course, since we are talking about technology. Here we go. Exactly. So why are we here talking about digital technologies to tackle power imbalances? So we at the Center for Humanitarian Action, we conducted, we published a paper earlier this year looking at how technology can actually strengthen participation and accountability. So some of the key findings which are relevant for the discussion today and which are based on a literature review and discussion with several practitioners working in the humanitarian field is, so to say, digital transformation is not happening overnight. It's a long journey, and we will hear about this journey later on. And we have to take into account that it can be an option, it's a viable option, but it's not the only one as well. So we have, as already mentioned in the previous panel, we have analog communication tools, we have digital communication tools, and it's a choice, and we need to understand which of the choices are actually preferred by the people we want to communicate with. So we also learned that it's not easy. So we talked about data protection, we talked about privacy, we talked about frameworks, we talked about investments, capabilities, capacities. So we need to find simple answers to operationalize actually a very complex topic into practical realities. And with the very experienced panelists today, we'll provide a couple of examples how this could actually work. So the practitioners I've spoken to mainly recommended that for actually having a digital transformation and also talking about accountability, and all of us who have been working on accountability know it's a mindset shift. It's not happening in a day. It's the way we approach, we co-create, we co-design our response and our way we work to support local communities. So we also need a nuanced approach, meaning on the one hand, we do have all these risks, and they are overwhelming, and they are very important, and we are all afraid, or we all know about data. We have heard about data protection in various forms, and because they are so overwhelming, we sometimes or often forget that people have a choice to choose if they want to use the WhatsApps, the Telegrams, the TikToks, or whatever, or if they want to continue talking with us face-to-face. So do we actually know what are these preferred communication channels? Do we actually know about it? At the same time, of course, we want to do no digital harm, and we want to, as we learned early on, not increasing accountability, but not vulnerability. And of course, that's why we are here, which we have been talking about. We have so many diverse stakeholders in the sector and in the ecosystem. We have the private sector, we have local Red Cross societies, we have local organizations, we have international organizations, INGOs. But we also need to listen and involve those whom we are meant to use this technology for. So there's the question of co-designing and co-creating, which Juliet was referring to in the previous panel as well, and I'm sure we'll learn about it from Kassem later on. With that, I will hand over soon to Kassem to give us some insights and experience from the Lebanese Cross, but we also want to involve the audience and understand, are you using actually digital technologies in your daily work to increase accountability? And if yes, how are you using it and which technologies are you using? So we would like to ask you to use a short survey. So you can access the survey either through the QR code, which is on the screen and online, or you can also use the hyperlink, which is shared in the chat, or using our webpage, the program conference webpage, Line-Upper. When you scroll down to the panel 2, you will have the link to the survey as well. We'll get back to the results in a second. With this, Kassem, I would like to hand over to you and ask you, I mean, we have been talking about, we have raised all these buzzwords of accountability, participation, engagement, and now having learned that you have been with the Lebanese Red Cross for so long, how have you been starting your journey on digital transformation? How have you been, using digital technologies to engage people? Over to you.
Thank you. Can I have the pointer, please?
Sure.
Yeah. So done with, you took the code. Yeah? So through our experience as Lebanese Red Cross, we'll be speaking more about the digitalization and how we are using that on the preparedness and response and even during recovery. And again, always we need to ask ourselves why we are using digitalization. It is not about digitalization, and by itself alone, I mean, you will not find solution. So this is what we learn. The Lebanese Red Cross, we started in Lebanon since 1945, and we really start to focus on digitalization in 2018. But again, that really took us through the experience, and again, through our position with the government and the acceptance that we have with the local communities. So in addition to my role, I am the LRC focal person at the DRM at Council of Ministry. We're there where they are taking really all the decision when it comes to the national disaster risk reduction and national response preparedness. Because if you are speaking about change only at the level of organization, then simply there is no sustainability and it will stay at the level of the organization. And that it will end up on doing competition between different organizations. And there's always question, what is in for me? And for us, what we are trying to do is what we need to do for the community, and we should work with the community in order to maintain the sustainability. And for us, we start like baby steps. For us, the dream was we need to come to show map with points, really to understand where our operation is for the search and rescue. And then when we really start to invest more on the community preparedness and the government preparedness through the disaster risk reduction, we've done one visit to one of the local government, or actually union of municipality, where they are really focusing a lot on digitalization, and they was funded by big organization. And he just asked me, look at this map, we have all this multi-hazard existing. Then I asked him, can you please take me through the map? And simply he was not able to translate this map into action. So again, it is not really about we as international humanitarian organization. This is not how we can support the localization. I mean, it should come with the community in order to understand that. And now, if you can see really in these pictures here, we start to develop the survey based on the community need in order really to understand the local need, based on the multi-hazard that they are facing, based on the capacities that they are facing, and again, to help them to do like mitigation, prevention, and response. But in order to do that, we really make sure that we've done, because again here, like, one step back, who's our community? We are always speaking about community localization, and for us, there is multi-layers, the bottom-up and the up-bottom approach that they are feeding to each other. So when we really need to consult with the government, what is really existing, and what they know, and what they need, and how this data can really feed in and help them. Then you need to go back again to the local NGOs to really understand from them what they need and what is really existing within the international organization and within the government. And this is, we call it stakeholder mapping, stakeholder analysis, look at the existing and build on that. And for us, we took the scenario of 2006 war in Lebanon. If the people, they knew that it was really a big war where most of the roads are blocked and there's data required and people, they were requesting support. Again, I will jump back again to the Beirut blast in last 2 years, where we see how this data help us. Again, it's really good and bad story. For us, you will not be able to test this tool unless there's something happen. And in Lebanon, we are in a response mode every day, and we are doing development as we go. So we were really able to test and pilot all this part. So we developed 33 data collection survey on all of the capacity that we found out the local NGO, international NGOs, UN, and the government need. So this is the buy-in. And then again, why we need this data? It's one, we need to save life. It should help us to access this information easier, and we need really to establish platform easy to deal and easy to use. How we come up with this data? We consult with the community. Communities are speaking about it. And then communities, they map it on the paper where it is. And then jointly with the community, we go down to start to collect this information. And we empower the local authorities to keep updating this information. I'm not saying life is easy and it's functioning everywhere. And again, we again looked at the other part. So all this data that we are collecting here, it's really pumping here. And then we start to speak about the multi-hazards that the communities that they are facing. And they just draw it on the map. And then our team, they go down and they just sketch the hazard. And it's not only about the hazards that they are facing, even the impact, because we really need to see the impact. So based on that and based on the existing capacity can really help us to take the right decision. Then during Beirut blast, we found out that this data is really very relevant to help us to take decision. But then we need to find a way how we can communicate with the community in order to address their need. And we start really to look for a solution. So why we came to this idea, because we found out people, they are in the news, they are saying no one answering the phone, we are not able to reach them. And then we consult with the local NGOs and with the international NGOs. And we came up, we work on the CRM system, where it's like starting to do complete comprehensive mechanism. I'm not sure about the time, it's not moving.
The clock is running.
How many minutes I still have? No? Okay.
Few more minutes.
I will jump faster then. So for us, and based on this data, we were like better prepared during cholera. So during COVID-19, we established survey on the survey 123, where the community can request oxygen machine. And then it's not limited to, even we found out that communities that they are not able to use the survey, how they can do it, they can just simply call the hotline. So again, there's no one solution fit all. You need to work really on the multi-function. We were better prepared during cholera based on all the lessons learned that we learned from COVID, where they took decisions, they need to do mass vaccine at the country level. Since we have the capacity of the hospitals, pharmacies, PHCs, schools, etc., we just took this map, we added there, and we share this information with other organizations to help them to understand really what is the need and where is the special need as well, to help them to fast their response. Actually, normally I go this presentation for 2 hours. I'm trying to do it in 10 minutes. And really is a last point where we again doing very engagement with a scientific national research center at the country, where we engage with scientific body, with the DRM at Council of Ministry, where they are the decision makers. And again, we used our experience with them, and we came up again to this dashboard. It's helping for early warning mechanism for the forest fire for today, tomorrow, and the day after tomorrow. Simply, I will conclude here, and I will be around if you have any questions later on. In order to do that change, we need really to come together. Community, local institution, private sector, government, and the scientific body. And we should build on existing mechanism and existing structures to maintain the sustainability as we go. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Kassem. You can leave it.
I forgot to mention, you have the barcode here where we have the story map. All what I just presented, you can see it in the nice story map.
Exactly. Thanks a lot, Kassem. This was super impressive, and I took a few notes for the next panelists to complement what you have been talking about. You said that we have to come together all. We have to discuss as a community. So that's why we also have, let me call it, I'm not sure if it's actually correct to say that GSMA is a private sector representative. Barnaby with us today. So, but before moving to the question to you, Barnaby, we would like to understand if you actually use technologies in your daily work and what kind of tools are you using, because for any kind of tools you are using, you would need connectivity by mobile operators, which Barnaby will be soon talking about. So if we can get the results from the survey, that would be brilliant, just to get an idea if our assumption proved wrong or false. So most of you are using it. That's a pretty overwhelming kind of feedback. And then let's see what kind of tools are you using. Okay, so I guess most of the tools, and we have been mainly asking about digital tools, of course, they all need connectivity. And as we were assuming, there are not so many colleagues or organizations using chat or voice bots yet. So let's see if we can learn a bit about how this could actually be helpful or maybe too risky to apply. So Barnaby, we have now learned that most of the organizations are using digital technologies in one way or the other for supporting and engaging affected populations. So what is the role of the private sector or an organization like GSMA to share those experiences? Over to you.
Thank you. Let me try. Hi there. Thanks very much, Andrea, and thanks, Kassem, for that. Really, I'm going to also talk a bit about Lebanon, but just sort of taking up your point about the use of technology. 95% of the world is covered by mobile internet, and over half of the world is actually using it. So I mean, really interesting results there. So much use of technology. So it's enormous reach of mobile technology, which means it's super important to engage people where they are. This is an increasingly digital and mobile sort of platform for engaging. So mobile operators can strengthen accountability, to answer the question simply, by providing a platform for affected people, for humanitarians, and that includes local actors. So the GSMA is the global trade association of the mobile phone industry, and we have over 700 mobile network operators as members across the world. And the program I'm in, the Mobile for Humanitarian Innovation program, is part of the foundation activities, which is funded by the UK government. And our aim is to support and expand responsible digital ecosystems in humanitarian crisis. And we do this through innovation grant funding, partnerships connecting the tech industry and humanitarian agencies. And we also work with governments to overcome policy and regulatory barriers. And then finally, research and learning to build an evidence base on how to do this effectively, and there'll be some links on the presentation. So a lot of what we do effectively is to encourage the industry to do more to support humanitarian crises, not through giving money particularly, but through appropriate innovation, through responsible partnerships, and overcoming some of these legal regulatory barriers. So to get a bit more specific, there's lots of ways that I think we've heard about already in terms of how agencies use mobile services for accountability. There's hotlines, different apps, two-way engagement, as well as the sort of broader things that we heard about in terms of assessments, data collection, mapping. And so I think the theme of successful partnerships is really important, because successful mobile operators have a very good understanding of how people use mobile services and how to design something effective for them. And I think where they then co-design something, a product with humanitarians and other local organizations, they can together make sure that these are appropriate, consistent with humanitarian principles, and also adhere to good practice in terms of data protection, which is something that mobile industry has to take very seriously. So a specific example of where the GSMA has brought together technology and humanitarian agencies to support accountability and participation is a chatbot for engagement with Syrian refugees in Lebanon. It's called Solace Bot. So we provided a fund to the NGO, a grant to the NGO Solidarité, and they developed a WhatsApp messaging chatbot for Syrians. It supports in 300 field sites, so it's a very extensive program. They were finding their telephone hotline was often busy. People didn't feel like they were actually being listened to. So to this point about designing for how people use the technology, the chatbot used WhatsApp, which was a very common platform, but it also incorporated voice recognition and used machine learning because people were very comfortable with leaving voice notes to provide feedback. So this was a really interesting example of where actually this was co-designed between an NGO working with a vulnerable community, but with the technology platforms. Just to sort of point to another area that I think is really useful and important, particularly in humanitarian crises, is the use of anonymous platforms. And one of these that many of you may be familiar with is Loop, which I think is a really important example of how particularly where you can have it in a mobile-enabled way, so people can really access a platform to provide anonymous feedback, particularly on sensitive issues. This is a way to encourage people to engage, to encourage communication, but to do it anonymously so the sensitive information isn't at risk. So I guess I'll just close by saying the key theme that we see in our programming, and I'm happy to talk about it more later, is meeting people where they are. And so many people are digital, but we'll come back to where that can be a challenge and how we overcome some of the risks of exclusion. Thank you.
Thank you, Barnaby, and thanks for this very nice, for me, helping me to ask my next question to Valentina, actually. Because as you mentioned, I mean, there's so many people are online nowadays and are connected, but we also have people who are not connected, and we also learned that it's very context-specific, and that's why we have also, well, looking at the International Rescue Committee, Valentina, looking at you, you have a client responsiveness approach. What does that actually mean? And when you think of technology and when you have introduced technology in your work from a client responsiveness perspective, how do you approach it? And what are your experience when using technologies to actually strengthen accountability and participation?
Thanks a lot. It might be a very yellow slide, so maybe let us move to the next one. So yeah, I think just additional food for thought to the audience today. I will take us a bit step back, closer to the concepts of accountability to affected populations. We have been talking about it. I mean, since I started working in the humanitarian sector, I feel like grand bargaining, participation, revolution was on the agenda, and like since I've been working, the progress is not really advanced, and now people turn more and more towards technology to basically find new methods, solutions to finally be accountable to the populations that we serve. But I will take a step back around what we observed within the organization is around the behavior, internal incentives. So like, yes, we have the global commitments. Yes, we all understand and agree that we need to follow them, but there are all the time other priorities, risks. We all work in crisis settings. So how do we actually hold ourselves accountable to those AAP commitments, but also provide systems, methods for community, for effective communication with people to, do the same with us. So what we have been doing within IRC for quite some time is basically to shift those organizational strategic priorities and incentives among our staff. So one of the first steps for us was to not talk about beneficiaries anymore, because it's a very disempowering term. It doesn't really help anyone. It doesn't really help us with working with the frontline staff and basically communicating this message that you have to be engaged with the communities. You need to listen to their needs. You need to prefer communication with them using the methods that they would like to communicate with you, and you need to spend time working with the communities and not just write another proposal at your desk. So yeah, one of the areas that helped us to like shift these internal incentives to really put this term within our organizational AAP framework was around client responsiveness and using terms of clients, maybe bringing us more to the perspective of humanitarian agency provides services. We're supposed to provide services based on the needs and preferences of the clients that we serve. In the private sector, like the power imbalances or like the power relations are completely different. Clients decide where they bring their money. In our sector, unfortunately, these powers are not exactly the same. So people are supposed to benefit from the services, but actually they don't decide what they would like to receive. They just get something provided by the agencies, also with the trust most likely to the agencies that they, of course, will provide what is needed. But, well, that's not always the case. So I think, yeah, one of the internal organizational strategy was really to like shift this perspective. And, you know, like sometimes I feel like, now I'm going the wrong way. I feel like simple things of just communicating it within the organization, that it is organizational strategy, it is an organizational culture, it is applicable for all staff to make sure that clients are in the center. Doesn't matter where you work. If you work in finance, in supply chain, in programming, it was really very helpful and powerful within the organization to align it with our mission, values, and You know, like I work just like on one sector of client responsiveness, part of the small team, and we're supposed to influence the shift within the whole organization that operates in, I don't know, over 30 countries. And this is not easy, but I would say it really helps to go with this like one organizational voice, and among all the priorities that we're working on, to put it at the center, to make a clear message that you have to do it. It's everyone's responsibility. It's not only the responsibility of the meal unit to set up a survey. It's not the responsibility maybe of a person to set up a WhatsApp channel and then magically respond to, I don't know, 500 requests per day. This is physically not possible. So I think that's where it takes me to the solution with the technologies. So when we open communication channels, and of course with like good intentions, we do open them with like hotlines, SMS. I was surprised to see so many responses with social media accounts. I would love to hear how people manage data security and privacy with these methods. But you know, like you open the channel, and of course people are hungry for information, so they go and use it. But how do you do data management? So I would never work with our teams to open hotline without actually having standard operating procedures, roles and responsibilities, data management. Imagine tomorrow you get 500 responses, what you will do with that. If you get those and you don't get back to people, people don't call the line, they don't get a response, they are dissatisfied, they're really annoyed with the support that they're supposed to receive, they're promised, but like nothing is coming out of it. So that's really not helpful, and this is when technology comes in. We have several examples with more of a like low-cost solution when you just use open platforms like Comcare, Power BI. It's for free, maybe not Power BI, but at least Comcare. You do case management forms, you do data management, you do data floors, you train your staff, and they are responsible to do this work because they see this very yellow sign every day at their workspace that they have to put clients at the center. When you open the hotline, again, using the examples of the private sector, you know, like customer support from the private sector, we all call the hotlines, and I do love chatbots, but I'm the kind of person that I use the voice, but most likely I just wait till the operator answers. So yes, that's how we work, and that's how a lot of people, and I would say, especially looking at the preferences of our clients, I'm actually asking, how would you like to communicate with us? Most likely they would like to speak to a real person. I mean, with the chat box, I actually also agree that it's a very good solution when you have ready responses, but with the tendency how fast tracking our programming is, how many changes we do, sometimes like updating our frequently asked questions and responses, basically you have to update them maybe every day, and this is time and effort. So yes, there should be a real person on the ad line, and yes, it is an investment, but there are also tech solutions that will help us with like, I don't know, waiting lines. There are ticketing systems like Jira and Zendesk that helps you with that as well. So I would say, yeah, there are solutions. Technology helps to that for that terms, but it's kind of like one piece of the puzzle. There is a lot about organizational culture. There is a lot about buy-in and prioritization from your staff who works with clients on the day-to-day basis. And yes, of course, technology can help us with the rest. So yeah, thanks a lot for your attention.
So technology can help us with the rest. Taking your words now, Kassem, asking you, I mean, you said it was, well, yesterday you said it's a long journey when we spoke. So in a quick few words, what were the main milestones on this journey to actually co-create, have local actors involved, and to go digital?
6 years and 5 minutes. You know, for us, one of the main challenges that we found out, you see the operation team working alone, and you have the IM and the development team on the other side. And that really will achieve nothing. Because for us, the IM team, they should develop based on the need of the operation team to feed in the community need. And this is for us what we really change. We make sure, even with all of our stakeholders, we run through workshop, we put the IM team together and the operation team together, and we've done brainstorming. Then the operations, they start to understand what the system can do, and then the development, they start to understand more what the operation team, they need. Because at the end, we need to accept by starting, we need to start baby steps. We cannot do everything. And we do, and we really need to understand that we will do a lot of mistake at the beginning, and then we should to learn from our mistake. And this is another point, that we are not learning from our mistakes, and we are not building on existing, development. Take the scenario of COVID-19. There's a lot of things happen. Now, when we went back to speak about cholera, we start from scratch. There's already a lot of things taking place. So this is one. Second, there's always question, what is in for me? And for us, again, for all of the international organizations, the question, it should be what is in for the communities. And we really should to come together. It's not about competition, because what we found out that when we run to any workshop, everyone trying to introduce what they have instead of listen what is existing at the country and how you can help them to maintain this sustainability. And the last point for the partners and donors and back donors, it's really very important to focus on the complementarity, on doing linkages between the dots. And if you fund, and if you need to fund any projects, our recommendation is really very important to see, look at the existing projects taking place. Let's to make sure that there's proper mapping. And it's very important for the donors to speak with each other. It's not only the international organization or the local organization, by forcing all of us, at the end, it's one business. All of us, we should force each other's to come together. It will not happen overnight. Then we can save a lot of money. We can do a lot of achievement by building on different projects. This is a complementary approach. Thank you.
So if it's a complementary approach, what is the private sector bringing to the table, Barnaby? We heard about the challenges which Valentina was referring to, and probably the private sector or mobile operators, you mentioned there are more than 700 stakeholders. How can they support the sector in overcoming those challenges?
It's a really good question. I think actually sort of client responsiveness, as Valentina uses the term, is definitely one of the elements of it. But I just want to say a little bit about this question of how do we improve people's connections and avoid exclusion, because the world is becoming more connected, but people in crisis are often the least connected. And as we heard from the previous panel, being connected comes with its, new risks that are attached to that. So I think the best example is where, mobile companies, in our case, actually see it's important to invest in a particular service in a particular area where that's going to allow accessibility to women or people with disabilities. And there are some operators who see this and they see the business case. And there's a very good example in Pakistan. Jazz, the operator there, has got a really progressive approach to inclusion. But it's not true of every part of the industry. So some of the things that we do to encourage that and encourage this sort of mutual learning is better understanding the challenges. So this is context-specific understanding, really understanding the local context. We have a tool, actually, if I can find the slide again, which is called CONUA, which is the Connectivity Needs and Usage Assessment Tool. And, okay, don't worry.
Let the colleagues work. Maybe you can search for it.
That's all right. Anyway, this is about understanding where there is connectivity. And it's something we developed with REACH and with the Emergency Telecoms Cluster. Yeah, there it is, CONUA. Thank you. And that's so you can see where there is connectivity and make the case for where you need connectivity. So a really good example is from Sudan, where this survey was done. It established that actually there wasn't much connectivity in refugee hosting areas. And so actually UNDP ended up funding temporary mobile towers to actually show the operators, look, there are tens of thousands of refugees here, really actually desperate to use your services, humanitarian agencies who want to do mobile money, cash transfers. So it's worth you actually putting your money in there. And so that's actually led to permanent infrastructure. So there's a real sort of, partnership there. But also researching the barriers is critical. This is something we spend a lot of time looking at. Is it about, can people afford handsets? Can they afford data? Can they charge their phones? These are all barriers that, we're all familiar with, but even more so in humanitarian crises. Are there legal barriers like refugees not being able to access or register SIM cards, and then cultural, social, particularly language barriers. Next week, we're actually going to be publishing the annual Mobile Gender Gap Report. And one of the statistics in that annual report is that women are 19% less likely than men to use mobile internet in lower middle-income countries. And that's actually, the gap is widening, having closed a bit during COVID. So sort of understanding why that is critical. And we did some reports, some primary field research in 3 displacement contexts: Papua New Guinea, Lebanon, and South Sudan, which was called the Digital Worlds Research. And I'm just going to go back to this, the Digital Worlds of Displacement Affected Communities. And this was really understanding how differently people use their phones. So in Papua New Guinea, there was a big language barrier, as well as digital literacy being a huge barrier. Whereas in Lebanon, huge challenge was around scams for people getting messages on their phone about resettlement. So understanding the different challenges is critical. And digital literacy and trust, actually trusting to use the chatbot, was a good example of where actually people don't always trust the chatbot for the reasons that Valentina said. So we have also got a mobile internet skills training toolkit, which has been used in 27 countries. Just a final thing where I guess it's sort of another example of where we've learned across between the private sector and humanitarian agencies is in Rwanda, the mobile operator there has trained their agents on the humanitarian code of conduct when they're actually working with refugees, so they understand the particular situation that refugees are in. So I guess those are just a few examples of some of the ways in which private sector tools working with humanitarian agencies have sort of been tried in particular countries and then actually scaled up. And I think the very practical partnerships are really the way to learn, combining this sort of client responsiveness with the sort of humanitarian understanding of the needs of affected people. Thanks.
Thanks, Barnaby. Before turning to the discussants, the last question to you, Valentina. So, as Barnaby was just saying, combining client responsiveness and technologies or private sector perspectives, how is that actually possible, and what is your experience on that one?
Yeah, very, very good question, and I think that's where I will turn more to the work, or like one of the enablers that we know is very critical around the work with like partners and frontline staff. So, you know, we do develop a lot of very fancy tools, sometimes at the HQ level or through the country program, I don't know, tech team that like, yes, we have the problem, we'll tackle it. And then with the expectation that, you know, like in the end of the day, people who will be using it on the day-to-day basis are those who work with clients, with the affected population on the day-to-day basis. So our key priority needs to be that people on the frontline staff feel comfortable using it. We make sure that in multiple cases, the results of a huge assessment was actually saved just by talking to the frontline staff who works with the affected communities every day. You don't necessarily, like, humanitarian sector loves assessments, right? Like, we have so many of them. But I think we need to reconsider how much information and how much empowerment we need to give and facilitate with partners and frontline staff who knows much better, do people use mobile phones, and what is the access in a way that we all see, like when we live in the community, we don't need an assessment to see who is using phone or not. We basically have this information. Frontline staff are usually coming from the communities that we serve. So how about talking to them? How about making sure that they are eyes and ears of the areas where we work, and they can be much more involved in the design of the communication channels, design of our programs, design of our interventions, and they are the one who, at the end of the day, are face of the organization. So I think this is a huge component on the like people puzzle, and what I like sometimes refer like as a people, processes, technology, in a way that people that work within the organization, they need to value client values, the client perspectives, client feedback, client complaints, and really take it very serious and act upon it. That builds trust. they are the one who represent their organization, so people need to trust them, even to call the hotline that has your logo, or to use the chat box, or to answer your survey questions honestly, because like the humanitarian responses usually takes quite several years. People are getting surveyed and assessed multiple times while they live in the refugee settings. And people are smart, they know the questions, they hear the same people coming over and asking them the same questions. And well, you can use the system, you can turn it around, you can answer, but it's really sometimes the way that we need to use this personal communication through the frontline staff and also support it with the technology. So just technology, again, it can help a lot. Private sector has a lot of experience around the efficiency, so we need to learn from them around the efficiency. We need to learn from them not to develop and use software for each and every problem. There are so many existing solutions that we need to use, maybe pay for some subscription, but it potentially has been tested by the private sector. We don't need to test it ourselves. Yes, we need to adapt it to a crisis setting. This is understandable. But yeah, if I see another team who are opening a call for a vendor to develop a platform software, that personally makes me very unhappy, because we don't need another platform to be developed. We need to build on the experience that private sector is already doing and adapt it to the crisis settings, but we need to make sure that our frontline staff is also on board and able, capacitated, trained when needed to use it in the best way possible. So yeah, that's my answer.
Thanks a lot. At least I feel it that there's a bunch of experience and a lot of examples out there and on the panel as well. And I'm already alerting you, we'll be running 5 minutes late, so bear with me. I would like to turn, based on what we have learned and all the examples from the different stakeholders in the sector, I would like to turn to our discussants and those who have tuned in online. We have a special role during our session. We have 2 discussants for this session. We have 2 colleagues represented from the so-called Global South, or local partners, or just colleagues, who challenge us on the panel to give us a feedback of what they have heard and what they have taken along, and maybe raise a question. So let me turn to Chilande first, who's tuning in from, I think, Nairobi, or Kenya at least. Great. Unfortunately, Chilande couldn't make it in person. She is representing the Warande Advisory Centre, so has a bunch of very experience, a lot. And Chilande, we are looking forward to hearing from you what you have, or what you would just want to share with the panel, with us. Over to you.
Thank you, Andrea. And it's like Valentina heard what was going on in my head when she made her last comments and made me throw away all my other bullet points. But especially really appreciating the role that, what you're calling the frontline workers. I'm assuming these are some of your local country colleagues. Have to play in trying to get some of these things up and running, and some of this acceptance of the tools that we're trying to put out there going much faster. So thank you for those comments, and thank you for the comments that everybody has put out there. Kassem, I appreciate that you especially the acknowledgement that it's a journey that you're making. It's been 6 years and a few hours. I suspect you will multiply that before we get to where we want to get to. But thank you for that. On this question around how we're using digital technologies to reinforce accountability in humanitarian action, one of the things when I was just smiling, and even as I was listening to all of you speak, I kept going back to, I think technology is fantastic, but from where I'm seated, I always have to go back to that this technology is either being developed or being administered by human beings. And when you think about it from an accountability perspective, sometimes it's not just about the technology, but the human behind some of these technologies that makes it either difficult or very easy for this to open up the doors that we want to open. When you're thinking about accountability in humanitarian action, certainly from the civil society organizations that I've been working with in sub-Saharan Africa, quite a lot, there's a lot of prerequisites to ensuring that we do see and feel that accountability across the board. What tends to happen is that we try to use technology to get information, to mine information. We design technologies to collect information for us to make decisions, for us to understand, for us to therefore come back with solutions. And I'm liking the tempo that has been set by the panelists, which basically moves away from being extractive, because that's how technology tends to be introduced to some of our communities, and actually starting to look at how do we actually begin to have participation, how do we actually begin to have meaningful participation in this sector, so that we can actually get sustainable, effective and sustainable solutions to the challenges that we all face. So some of the things that I want to keep challenging us, those of us who are coming up with technologies, those of us who are thinking about using technologies, is how are we using this technology to enforce what we call dynamic accountability across the whole spectrum of the stakeholders that are involved in humanitarian actions. It's not just about getting information from the community to the other side. How do we ensure that this technology also helps us the other way round? How are we, as those of us who are administering this tech, being accountable when we take in this information and when we analyze it? What else? What happens then? How do we then go back to the community in a way that is meaningful, in such a way that they then get encouraged to keep participating or interacting with some of these technologies? I'm not surprised that social media was top of the list of how we engage with our clients, because it allows us to be interactive. It's much better than, for example, a Survey Monkey, where I type in and I send it to you, and then I have to wait for the executive summary of a document to tell me what the issues were. So just as an example, I think what we want to do is use more and more technology in this action that encourages interaction, that the feedback loop is continuous, that we are getting information, we are feeding it this way, and this information is also being fed back on the other way. So what I would, because I know we don't have much time, what I want to put out there as things for us to consider as we use more of this technology in humanitarian action is, what are we doing? How are we using technology to ensure that we are working in a way that is easy for others to see what we are doing, even for those of us, so that we open up the space between the two. Let's use technology in a way that actually that eases that interaction. I know what you're doing, and I know, most importantly, I know why you're doing that. I know why you're bringing this technology. So I was very appreciative of the narrative that I had, where especially I think it was you, Barnaby, that talked about spending some time to explain the why of a certain tool. The second thing I'll say is then, how do we then use this in ways that are appropriate to all our different communities to help us listen and help us to be open to constructive criticism that comes, so that we can learn together, so that we can make decisions together, we can address them together, so that solutions are not only being set by one side. I think technology is not being utilized enough to actually have co-creation of decisions and solutions to the challenges that we face. How are we ensuring that there's multiple stakeholders that are playing an active role across the whole chain of humanitarian actions that we're trying to take? How are we then building relationships along with this technology that we are putting out there, so that we don't just become very transactional. It doesn't just become a scientific affair that is, a scientific process of utilizing this tech. And lastly, what I'll say is, therefore, let us reflect a little bit on therefore the changes that we need to make with how we utilize, what technology we're using, how we utilize it, and then the so what after that, to make this a meaningful stakeholder engagement that encourages credibility across all the different stakeholders, that encourages clarity, that maintains respect across the board, and most importantly, that encourages trust across the whole engagement of the key stakeholders. Now, I could say so much more, but I just want to put those out there for now, because I was told I have about 3 minutes. I'll be back. Next time, if I came, I would say some more, but thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thanks a lot, Chilande. It was actually, I guess, 6 minutes, but that's fair enough. Don't worry. Quickly turning to you, Maria Vanesa, we have a second discussant to give her some feedback before turning to the questions, and then we'll combine everything to wrap up in a very probably kind of speed dialing, speed reacting way of trying to take the time. But first to you, Vanessa. Thanks for joining us from Caritas Colombia, and we are happy to listen to you, what your reactions are to what have been just discussed.
Thanks. Hello. Hello. Hello, everyone. My name is Vanesa Mendoza. I work in Caritas Colombia and a focal point for Together project. First, one second, my notes. Connecting with Julie's ideas in the previous panel and with Kassem. In this panel, it's very important that donors listen more the needs and difficulties at the local level. I think that many donors establishing requirements, but it's difficult to find qualified staff in different different locals, place. Okay. But the local organization don't have access to resources in many times. And in conclusion, the generation of capacities and condition at the local level is very important. And I have a question to Kassem. What solution do you suggest in remote areas without internet, for example, Amazonas in Colombia's case, for example? Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Vanessa. We will pick up that question in our wrap-up session, so bear with us that I think we have so much to learn about, and we have mentioned early on it's a complex topic, and I think there's a lot to discuss, but we also want to hear, of course, from your end if there had been any questions from the chat. And looking at Andrea's face, I imagine it has been quite active.
Yes, I have 2 questions and 2 comments for our panelists or for our whole audience here. The first question is from Abdul Khan, who asks, what are the measures already taken regarding digital downward accountability toward the affected population / in refugee settings? There's another question from a German organization, which I think goes to the IRC and the Red Cross. Does your organization partner with tech companies from the private sector to learn, especially from customer relations management, for example? And if so, do you see value in that kind of conversation? Then there is a couple of comments. The first one from Fassari Traoré, who thinks that this conference is really important and interesting, but he would appreciate, or it would also make the conference better if we would think about ways to include French-speaking audience as well. So this is something that we as CHA would take with us and try to be better next time. And I guess there is a digital solution for this one as well. And the last comment from the chat goes to Kassem from Hanichar, who says, excellent presentation, very much enriching and valuable. And I think this is something that we should also present here. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Andrea. The quick run for those who want to raise an on-site question. I hope you're not too tired to ask questions quickly. We will pick up two or three more questions, and then we'll wrap up in the follow-up session. The mics are in front. Please quickly introduce yourself for the colleagues online to know who's speaking. And thank you for turning the... Does it
Hello?
actually in English?
It's working?
Yeah.
I'm Patrick Hamadi. I work at Humedica here in Germany, in the Alps. I'm a policy advisor there. My question is, I think I've listened to all of you and I stand in full agreement to you. In fact, we ought to clap you. But I have one burning question that is on my mind. One, we realize technology is not necessarily developing at the same pace everywhere throughout. For example, many of the countries in sub-Saharan, many people have telephones. That's not an issue. I was the other day in a desert in Sudan, and I saw somebody, a Sudanese, in a camel, with a charger, cell phone charger, a solar charger. So the issue of phones and communication is not a problem. But the issue is what type, what scale, and all that. So the tools you're developing, are they accessible to all these different levels of of gadgetries that are available in the different settings? Because if that is not being taken care of, then somebody would complain about technology apartheid within the humanitarian setting. That's the question that I had burning in me. Bye, thank you.
Thanks a lot. So people are not yet fully asleep, so give us 5 more minutes to answer those questions. Let me turn to you first, Barnaby. There was a question, maybe we can pick on the last one, and what has been already done actually in terms of digital accountability, and what kind of skills are actually needed to make those tools which are available at the moment accessible to those who might not have the right or sufficient digital literacy, data literacy capabilities. So what is your key message which you want to take us home?
Yeah, I mean, I think to sort of emphasize what I was saying earlier, I think this question of understanding what the barriers are, whether it's a technology question in terms of actually mobile isn't the answer, as we heard from Vanessa, you may not actually have connectivity, you can't rely on it. Or you have a very simple phone. So I think designing for the appropriate technology or no technology is really important. And then understanding where the people, are not actually able to access those services. They don't have literacy. It's in the wrong language. It's not in French. So there's so many barriers. And it sounds obvious, but actually I think so many programs you see don't have the resources, don't have the time, particularly in a crisis, to understand what those barriers are. But I think my final message is really, there's a building evidence base, and it's something that we're really keen to build, this evidence base of where are some of the challenges, but where are some of the solutions, because there are solutions out there.
Thanks a lot, Barnaby. Valentina, there was a question on the tech partnerships. What is your experience and what is the added value working with the technology or IT tech sector, and what is your key message which you want people to take home?
Yeah, I think in our case, we do have several instances of learning more and using Jira, Zendesk, that are private softwares, and yes, a lot of customer support services use them. But it definitely is something that in each context needs to be identified for the area where we work. What is unfortunately the situation that private sector doesn't come across is a lot around the coordination between mobile operators. So it seems to be such a easy fix to set up a one single short hotline number in Germany, in Berlin. But when you start doing it in Colombia, in Kabul, or in Amman even, it seems to be such a complicated process that if people who haven't worked on this before and just rushing into these problems makes a lot of mistakes in the beginning, and then it becomes a very expensive thing to fix something in the process or just basically delete and start from the beginning. So I would say looking at the local providers first, coordinating with, where possible, international platforms, because once you develop it in one context, most likely with much cheaper and faster pace, you can apply it in another context. And basically, instead of developing something very country-specific, you can take your pilot, your example from Latin America and move it to Middle East or other way around, and basically applying with the right language and coordination with mobile operators is really something that has been recently frustrating very much because apparently they don't always coordinate in one country. Yeah, that's definitely something that worth investing because it helps you to better set up this two-way communication. One comment that I wanted to share around the participation that we heard from colleagues from Nairobi, from Kenya, is that technology will not solve participation just by itself, because participation includes this factor of people being involved in this process, and especially decision makers to making changes based on what they hear. Also, I mean, all the way going back to the donors as well, that yes, sometimes we do hear through the needs assessment, participatory methods that we might have used to what people would like to see being provided to them. And then we look at the different proposals that we might be running to different donors, and none of them are open to that. So the response that we can go back and give the community is that we don't have the right donor to write this proposal to meet your needs, because maybe it's very specific, or maybe, I guess, again, our colleagues in Nairobi can teach us so much about the mobile money and mobile cash. And this is one of the very, one of the services that gives so much choice and so much participation to the clients, in a way that they make the choice that how they want to spend this money. They make the choice what to do with this humanitarian aid donor funding, and this is also very empowering. It's only one example, and there are definitely more, but you cannot ignore this fact, and you cannot use an excuse that it doesn't work in areas with lower connectivity. If you provide this option, connectivity will come through, solar power will come through, people will go for it, because this is potentially what they would have chosen themselves. So yeah, I guess being more open and being more flexible, and just recognizing that this change needs to be happening will be extremely helpful and remove quite a lot of barriers on the way as well.
Thanks a lot. So this change needs to be happening. Looking back at your digital transformation journey, Kassem, there was the question on how you approach areas which are not actually connected and where there's no connectivity. So what is your experience, and what is your key message which you want to revert to the community and to the colleagues?
Sure. So for us, again, as it's mentioned by my colleague, community participation is a key, and based on your questions. So and as you see in my previous presentation, so the communities are speaking about their vulnerability, capacity, and hazard. Then for us, we are using ArcGIS map on its Esri tool, and we are using the survey 123, which is, we can use it offline. And then when you go back to your office, then when it is connected, then all the information, it's uploaded. So this is one. Two, in case of any crisis, connection, it may fail in any place. Due to that, and part of preparedness, what we do like screenshot, PDF maps, and again, with all of the information required, with just we make sure that it is existing, that in case of anything happen, we just go back to the old days, but it's already prepared ahead of time until you fix a connection.
Thanks a lot for the explanation. And I think, at least myself, I've learned a lot more about new technologies, which I haven't heard about, and then a lot of examples. So a big thank you to the audience, and I'm very honored, honestly, personally, because usually I work remotely, and I've seen all these people's faces on my screen, so I'm actually very grateful of having a panel which is on-site and in person, which is usually brings different vibes and different feelings and emotions. So a big thank from my side, a big thank you to the on-site audience, the online audience, for having stayed with us 10 minutes later and 10 minutes longer. To quickly wrap up and let you know what's happening next, we again have, only a 20 minutes break. We will continue with a snapshot, a 30-minute session with Darina and our colleagues from the Harvard Humanitarian Initiative, who will give some insights on their latest playbook, and we'll discuss digital inclusion of local humanitarian actors. And with that, give me a big thank and clap you for the panelists, and thank you, everyone.